leukemia. This is a normal bone marrow, and if you look down a normal bone marrow, you see cells of different sizes and shapes, red cells, white cells, platelets, all developing and producing the cells normally. If you've got leukemia, you see something like this. It's replaced by everything looking the same. And leukemia is the commonest childhood cancer. Affects, there are about 1,200 cases a year in the United Kingdom. Common ALL is the commonest one. And the investigation of the cause of that shows that it's probably due to an inherited genetic mutation where you have a 1 in 100 chance of getting it if you've got the mutation. And then a second hit occurs. And it may be linked to infection, and the strongest hypothesis is that the lack of childhood infections puts you at greater risk. So the wealthier people's children are more likely to get leukemia because they don't go to nurseries and get all the infections that their friends get at the pool. So that's the cancer of the immune system, where infection may be playing a part, but actually infection is preventative rather than causative. Now, there are other causes of childhood leukemia that have different etiologies, but that's an interesting fact. This is a brain tumour, normal brain, MR scan. I work at the University of Nottingham. The MR scanner was invented in the University of Nottingham. Sir Peter Mansfield got a Nobel Prize. And when I went to Nottingham, the scanners were scanned. We had the first ever scanner, MR scanner, in the world for clinical practice, and it was still there 7 years later, and everyone else had a much better one. That's what happens if you're the first. But this is a tumour here in the cerebellum, and actually this is a benign tumour. And if it's entirely resected by the surgeon, it needs no more therapy, and 90% of them survive. However, it presents with obstructive hydrocephalus, and they sometimes drop dead in the emergency room. And I could show you films of children for whom that has happened. And so timing of diagnosis can be critical. This is, I can show these x-rays one way round or the other. This is a large mediastinal mass, which is a T-cell lymphoma. This is a normal chest x-ray. With chemotherapy, that could be on day 1, and that could be on day 2. Because the chemotherapy is so powerful, it can shrink the tumour down literally as fast as that. The trouble is that if it gets very large, it causes superior vena cava obstruction. They end up with a big swollen face, and they can die from obstruction of the airway. And if they have poor access to healthcare, and no one suspects it, and they don't do a chest x-ray, it's an easy test, and then do the right biopsy, which might be tapping a pleural effusion, or putting a needle in, or biopsying a lymph node if there is one, to make the diagnosis. But as Khaled said, they all look like blue round cells, and you need to use immunocytochemistry and other tests to confirm the diagnosis to be sure you're giving the right treatment.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Walker, for your rather long but valuable talk. Obviously, it was highly specialized, and as a retired psychiatrist who's been long retired, most of it has gone way above my head. But I'm going to ask you a question. Rather than you top people like yourself and your Sudanese colleagues go to Sudan for what I call hit and run visits, and they come out with all sorts of solutions for problems that will not be applied in a country where the government is not willing to spend a penny on health. How do you think it's better? And I know that in my days, consultants often given sabbatical leave. Don't you think one should go there for a whole year and talk to people, convince the government as well as the medical people to do what you think is best? Thank you.
I've never persuaded anything of anything. There was a very famous politician in the United Kingdom called Lord Goodman, and he worked with Harold Wilson. And they said, how is it that there doesn't seem that any decision could be made without him approving it? And he said, I've always found a well-constructed argument to be most persuasive. And it's not about people, it's about constructing the argument. And I accept the criticism of being a hit and run. In fact, we're discussing what else we should do. But actually, I'm thinking about a longitudinal relationship. And I think research generates data which change people's mind. But you must work with the patients and the families who are involved in this, because they are the power. The best thing can happen is often for a politician's child to get cancer. In our country, we had a transformational attitude to funding for brain tumour research last year, when Baroness Tessagel got a high-grade glioma, spoke in the House of Lords, and then died. And that transformed. We went from having less than 1% of the cancer spend on brain tumour research to now having £50 million released in the last year. So I don't think it's a hit and run. I think it's get engaged with the public, get engaged with the family, hear what the Sudanese people want, and then you'll find that things will change.
First of all, I'm going to start and talk about this gentleman on this medal here. This was one of the first medals that was awarded by the Society. And there's a reference here at the bottom which suggests that he had strong links with Sudan. There's a very good article about his life and his work from the Sudanese Journal of Pediatrics, published in 2014. So this gentleman, Dr. Albert John Chalmers, he worked in Sudan around 1910 to 1920, and he was at the Wellcome Trust Research Laboratories in Khartoum, where he conducted significant research on animals and plants and vectors. And he worked through until 1920, and at that time he retired from his post and decided to go travelling with his wife. And unfortunately, while in the first year that he was travelling away and was in India, he contracted yellow jaundice, as it was reported at the time, and he died very shortly after that. The torrid zone really being the tropics, and at that time was very much recognised as where global, what we now call global or international health was focused. So protecting those in hot climates, being the torrid zone. I think things have very much changed now really in terms of what we recognise by tropical medicine, but the Society still has maintained that name, but we very much look at the wider concept of international health and global health, which I'll talk a bit more about during the talk. The ambition of the Society, we've refocused this since last year when we've relaunched our new strategy document, and I have some copies of this, and I can leave these outside later on, which tells you a bit about how we're aiming to do what we want to do. So our ambition being to stabilise and improve health through increased access and greater equity in global healthcare. And our mission to be at the heart of tropical medicine and global health community, providing knowledge and networks across disciplines. We used the Sustainable Development Goals. I noticed when I arrived early this afternoon that this image was being shown there, so I don't need to talk you through it. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it. Used this to focus on the areas that we wanted to see as important. We knew we're quite a small society, our reach could be a lot greater, but we wanted to be able to focus on specific things that were relevant, and the SDGs were a good place to start. So around good health and well-being, reducing inequalities, and the wider issues around things like the environment and climate are also important to us. So the thematic areas which we chose to focus on, and one of them being neglected tropical diseases, which we've heard something about this afternoon, and was the focus of our annual meeting this year. Also malaria, One Health and the wider planetary and climate change impact on health, other topical issues such as emerging diseases, and of particular importance, drug-resistant infections. The other journal, as I say, is more recent. International Health covers the wider aspects of global health, such as economics and healthcare systems. Slightly lower impact vector, but is improving, is increasing, and our recent editor-in-chief appointment is with Professor David Molyneux, who has been at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. And similarly, with that change in an expansion of the journals, we're looking for new editorial advisors and associate editors. So these are posts that if people are interested in, we have got information about them on our website, but I'm around staying this evening as well, so be welcome to talk to people about those. There's just a few articles here that have appeared recently in both of the journals, either of the journals, looking at leprosy, echinococcus, malaria, Toxoplasma gondii, and madeirosis. So we've got obviously really good connections with the academic community in Sudan already, but it's something we'd like to work on and improve. So we're always looking for new submissions there to either of the journals. So as part of preparing for this keynote talk, we contacted the Society, identified members in our networks, those members of the Society, but also those individuals who've been to our meetings or have signed up for our newsletter, who were either in Sudan or who had connections with Sudan. And we asked what they thought were the most important areas that we might want to consider discussing or identifying for the meeting or for future collaboration. And one of those was mycetoma, which I'm going to ask to show as a video on in a moment. I thought rather than myself talking about mycetoma, I found a short clip.
And just today the news is coming about 7 deaths, 7 fatalities of hemorrhagic fever in Al Jazeera states, less than 20 kilometers from Khartoum. This is serious, and the WHO office in Khartoum, they are good people, their heart is in the right place, but it's not the WHO office. It's the IHR, it's the International Health Regulation, to prevent them to interfere in any way unless a declaration came from the Minister of Health. And this has been happening for the last 40 years or so, that turns the WHO into a bureaucratic office. That most of the time works not in any support to the international health situation or anything, but rather a logistic office of the Ministries of Health.
Can I invite Peter Everington to give his presentation now, and then have a 5-minute break afterwards, and then we'll have the SDU meeting. Yeah? Peter, if you may.
I went out in 1958 and with the Ministry of Education and taught in Port Sudan Secondary and Khartoum Secondary. And then I was appointed lecturer in the Mahad al-Muallimin al-Ali, as it was in Omdurman, in Wad Nabawi, Teacher Training Institute. So I had 8 years there, and I've had 25 return visits to the country on education projects, and as Sarah said, in support of the peacemakers. And one of the medical institutions I admired very much in Sudan was that of the Mosaid Tibbi, a wonderful trained group of enthusiastic, competent people around the country who would just deal with you on the spur of the moment. And in the early 60s, when I was at Khartoum Secondary, I had a thulul, a wart on my forehead, and I just wanted to get rid of it. And so I wandered into Khartoum Hospital without any appointment at all, looking around for someone, and I met a Mosaid Tibbi. So he said, "Urgud fil kanaba," lie down on the couch, and then he got his Ibra Kaharabaiya, and he burnt off without any paperwork or anything like that. He just burnt it off, and the pain was very minor, and I laid there without saying anything. And afterwards he said to me, "Hababatak lazim ja'aliyah." So, coming to Sudan in 1958, aged 23, and brought up as a loyal son of the British Empire, and brought up to be proud of the empire, and just beginning to see signs of personal change in my own arrogance and the need for change in our British attitude to Africa and Asia. And it was only less than 2 years after Britain had invaded your neighbor country, Egypt, at Suez. So my concern was, what are these people going to think about a British person, from the empire? Because there was a passionate Arab and African nationalism. Most of Africa was under the European empires, wasn't it, at that time? So that was one concern. And secondly, was a concern as someone who tries to live the Christian life, how do you relate to Muslims in the course of daily work? How does that work out?